We went up against in MTV, Ellen DeGeneres, NBC, ABC, and we didn't win. But the funniest moment of that experience was that we got to the ceremony late. So my partner on the show and I walked in and we were sitting in the back of the space, and they started reading off the nominees, and ours was the last one, and they said, "And Driving Jersey," and it was silent because all the shows had big crowds of personnel there, and it was just silent, and you could kind of hear in my mind, I could hear people saying, what's that, Driving Jersey?
And welcome back to another episode of Green Jeans podcast or at Green Jeans Pod on Instagram. If you haven't joined our podcast before, we are talking about important environmental and social justice issues from a generational lens, because I am your one co-host, Annika Van Rossum. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joined by my other co-host,
Maya Van Rossum, mother and she, her.
So if you generational lens, because I'm a young activist, she has been a lifelong activist for years before me, all that cool stuff. And yeah, so you can join us every week for cool guests and different topic areas that we cover. Highly recommend. Yeah, I don't know.
So Annika, we're going to skip the fact check this week because we got a really cool guest and we got a little bit off track on time and timing. So I think we should just hop to our really cool guest. He's fun, he's inspiring, he's super interesting, and we'll do the fact check next time.
All right, so we are going to do you want to give Steve's intro, or do you just want to let Steve do it?
We're going to let Steve do his intro. Well, maybe a little bit. So I've had the great honor of working with Steve Rogers really over a number of years. Steve got in touch with me in my role as the Delaware Riverkeeper, wanting to do some reporting on river issues, ecological issues, pipeline threats that were harming communities. And oh boy, we'll have to ask Steve how many years ago that was, but he really ended up taping for quite a while and did an amazing piece on the PennEast Pipeline project. And then he got really interested in our Green Amendment work, and we've now been working together, and he's been helping to create a documentary series on our Green Amendments for the Generations movement. So that's all I'm going to say. And then I think we should let Steve introduce himself, because he's a fascinating person, and it'll be great to hear his life story.
All right, here comes Steve.
Steve Rogers, it's so cool to see you.
Good to see you both.
Oh my gosh, you look like a filmmaker.
He's so definitely a filmmaker. Have you ever met Annika, Steve, in person?
I sure have. Yeah.
Steve interviewed me for the.
Oh, that's right. He introduced you. Yeah. See, I was just saying, Steve, how, we've had the honor of working together for a number of years now. I can't even remember all the cool projects. But before we jump into that,
yes,
right, as Annika always likes to say, we'd like to let our guests, we do a little intro, which you didn't get to see, but we always like to get our guests to introduce themselves, because you're going to give the best, most rich picture of who you are, what you do, and what people should know about you as a filmmaker who talks about really critical issues of the day, including the environment, but also other things. So maybe if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
You've just done it.
Yeah, but you'll do it better.
I'm Steve Rogers, and I grew up in New Jersey and moved to New York, and was looking to pursue a career in film, but more on the other side of the camera than I am now. I wanted to be in front of the camera. And, through a series of events and jobs that I had working in the city, what have you, I placed myself behind the camera and just found a natural fit. And so we'll get into it, but essentially my favorite things to cover are real life in a real way. When we started doing the series on PBS, the premise was that you could jump in your car, and when you live and work in New Jersey, and New Jersey is such a diverse state, that you could jump in the car and within an hour or two, you could be in a totally different kind of region, area, different kinds of people, culture, whatever. So the series was originally called Driving Jersey, and we called it the Reality Road Trip, because so
Love
much
that.
of what we see, yeah, so much of what we see on television and in popular culture media is through filters. And we didn't really want there to be any filters. So very often when we would go out, my crew would say, "What's set up for today?" And I'd say, "Just that we have cameras and we're going to go out and we're going to see what we find and who we find." And that was sort of the original thing. I wanted it to be totally spontaneous. And then as my work progressed, issues that were near and dear to me, and should be near and dear to everybody, I think, started to come into what the work that I did. And so that's one of the reasons I was lucky enough to meet you, Maya, and to begin working with and for you in a way too. So that's it in a nutshell.
I think that's
now,
so cool.
you
Yeah.
you started though.
Go.
So, but I just want to jump one more thing, Annika, because it started off being called Driving Jersey, but now it's called so that people can watch it. We want to make sure we don't forget that because
And
it's really fascinating.
That's an interesting thought too. It's an interesting transition, because it started off being called Driving Jersey, and the production company is still called Driving Jersey, because that's sort of the name of the child that we had and kind of we took off with. And but the show is now called Here's the Story, because that's really what we do. We meet people and we let them tell the story. It's rare actually that you ever see myself or hear myself very often. We try to let the subject tell the story, their story, whatever the story is.
I just think I always, like, when I first saw that the Green Amendment episode, which I don't want to talk about yet, but how you just work stuff together so amazingly. I'm bad with English right now, like amazingly well, Steve. And so I'm just like curious too with your, I think that's so interesting. I haven't heard many stories of people being like, I wanted to be in front of the camera to now behind the camera. And so like what inspired that? And then maybe once you did, you said it was like this natural fit, like what are some of the characters that led you to where you are today?
Well, it was roundabout in a way, because when I moved to New York, I wanted to be, like I said, in front of the camera in some form. And but I was always a writer. I was always writing things. I always wanted to create things. I was always producing things through college and before that even. And so when I first moved to New York, there was a program on TV called Northern Exposure, and I liked the show. And I wrote some scripts for them and submitted them just to see what would happen. And a month later, I got a call from the actors on the show saying, "We love these stories, these scripts. We want to get you up to Washington State where they filmed it to get you on the staff and be a writer." And so the idea of me being in front of the camera and being on camera kind of started to, at that point, the path began to go in a different direction, because these folks said to me, "You're great at crafting, you're great at writing and directing and creating something. So focus on that." And naturally, it's easier to be a documentary filmmaker than it is to produce feature films as well. So yeah, and the other aspect of it was that I was working at the Emmy Awards at the time, and I was the guy in the office that would see what was getting Emmy. This is probably bad for me to say, but I was the guy in the office that would see what was getting Emmy Awards, and I would just shake my head and say, "This is what we're giving awards to." I would say these things, and my coworkers and colleagues would always say, "You should put your money where your mouth is, and if you think you can do better, you should do it." So I did. And that's basically.
And when was that? When did you start doing the documentary path?
2009, 2008, probably. It was at the end of my time at the Emmy Awards. So I left the Emmys in 2009. So it was just before that. Yeah.
And you hopped right into Driving Jersey, or did you do some other things first?
No, I hopped right into it. I mean, I started doing it as a web series, and I actually entered the Emmy Awards the year after I left the Emmys, because they had a category for web only based content, and I entered just to see what would happen, and because my colleagues had said enter because this stuff is all being judged and viewed by producers of network television, cable television. They should, if they see it, they might like it. They might, want to bring you on board. I never dreamed we'd get nominated, but we did. We got nominated the first time we entered for a national Emmy Award, and it was pretty crazy to have that happen. We went up against MTV, Ellen DeGeneres, NBC, ABC, and we didn't win. But the funniest moment of that experience was that we got to the ceremony late. So my partner on the show and I walked in, and we were sitting in the back of the space, and they started reading off the nominees, and ours was the last one. And they said, and Driving Jersey. And it was silent because all the shows had big crowds of personnel there. And it was just silent, and you could kind of hear in my mind, I could hear people saying, what's that, Driving Jersey? And my friend and partner on the show, co-creator, stood up and was like, yeah, yelled for us. And the group right in front of us were the folks from The Daily Show. And they turned around and looked to see these two guys. And they stood up and were clapping for us. And so that was, we didn't win, but it was a fun experience, fun ride for sure. Yeah, that was the start of it. And then PBS heard the story of this fledgling group of filmmakers that were just making television, making films on their own, and they invited us on board. So yeah.
It's just, this story is so cool. It's so interesting. I'm always like, when people, I feel like it's like, it looks like I'm trying to think of what to say, because it is, because I just think people's stories are so cool. I'm like, oh man, I have to process like the 5 million questions I want to ask.
Listen, that's what I do. I mean, I loved conversation, and so it was natural for me to do this. And what's funny, you say that, is I used to always sit with a piece of paper and a pen, and I would have all these questions, and I would be looking down, and then I realized that I like to talk. So I could throw the paper away and know my subject and just have a conversation.
The thing that, so for folks now, to sort of bring people up to speed. So Steve, like I told them in the beginning, wanted to do a piece on pipelines. And so we connected up, and he did this beautiful piece. Here's the story. I forget what it was called. So I think it was initially Rivers, a piece of an episode. Right? Here's the story, Rivers. Right. And it was really, really fascinating. And then after that, Steve and I started talking because his piece was so powerful, and I wanted him to use his talent to help spread the word about the Green Amendment. And so he started helping to create this documentary series about the Green Amendment. And so we've had, here's the story of the Green Amendment, and we had a piece about New Jersey, and we've had a couple segments about New Mexico, and we're talking about what will be our next one. But there's a point to this, while we were talking one day, because Steve wonderfully gets back in touch and says, well, what about this? And what about that? And, has just filled with all these ideas. But you said something to me, which quite shocked me. You were talking about how you were putting together, or how you put together your pieces. And you talked about how you listened to all the interviews like 6 or 7 times. So, and I was just like, what? So can you talk a little bit about that process that you go through? Because it's, when people watch your films, it's so seamless how these conversations get woven together, and how you shift from one idea to the other and take people literally through a story. But there's so much more that goes on behind the scenes and crafting that. And I got that little glimpse into that so much more with that one comment.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I didn't go to school to be a filmmaker. my mom and dad were big TV viewers, big film people. We sat, and that was one of our major pastimes, was watching movies and then talking about it. My parents were educators, and they loved to sit around and analyze and ask us questions about it. So that was probably my education, and then the rest is all self-taught. I'm sure folks who go to school for documentary filmmaking probably have a whole process that I don't even know about, like storyboarding and writing scripts. Um, I'm not saying I don't like films that have narrative voiceover over them. I just never got into it in terms of my own work, because when I make these things, I want it to be, like I said earlier, unfiltered. And so just me telling the story in whatever way I do, if I were to do voiceover, would be me filtering. So what I do is, over a period of time, it depends on what the piece is, but for, say, the film we did, about the two films for PBS about the Green Amendment, I think the process probably went on for a year, I think, about that. And we're talking probably 12 or so interviews, maybe total. And so what I do is we film all of these interviews, and then, yes, indeed, I watch them over and over again. And when I'm making dinner, here's the office. I mean, this is one of the offices in my house. This is my favorite one because it gets the most light. And
He's
I'm
sitting in the kitchen, everybody.
Sitting in the kitchen. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. I should paint the picture. Sitting in the kitchen. And I spend so much time in here. And so when I'm making dinner for myself and my daughter, what have you, I will have the video going, and I'm hearing it, and I'm hearing the story unfold, and I'm hearing how it should be told. And with so many subjects, you're kind of listening to see where one person tells the story to this point, to a certain point, and then the next person picks it up from there, and how they overlap and weave together. And so for me, it's always the chorus of all the voices of all the people that we've interviewed. You, Maya, have always made it easy because you're great at encapsulating who the people are that we're talking to, interviewing, conversating with, and then also the issue, and then how they apply to the issue. So it's always a pleasure to work with you in terms of making films, because I think somewhere you have a documentary filmmaker mind.
You're very kind.
Well,
it's more fun working with you. I don't think I'm very fun to work with. I think I'm probably pretty irritating, because I'll come up with you with a question and you'll be like, what? And you'll be like, and I remember when we were doing the New Mexico series, right? How many interviews did I come back with? I came back with something like 24, and you're like, no, Maya, we can use like 5.
Right. I think when you went there, I said 8 tops.
Yeah, I came back with a lot more. But you've done this beautiful set of films as a result of that, because somehow you have this beautiful way of pulling them all together.
And it also has given us an idea of how something like this, where you go out and you think you're going to get 8 interviews and you're going to put together an hour-long film, when you go out there to any state, really, you discover more people and more angles and more ways to tell the story. And so that, I think, sort of gave rise to this thought that this could be something that should be ongoing. You could spend, multiple episodes or multiple films in each state. And so that sort of is an idea that I know we've been talking about. Anyway, I don't know if you want to get into that.
Well, I hope we bring it. I hope we bring it to life. We might come back to that, but really, we want to tell your story.
Okay.
Today. We want to do. Here's the story, Steve Rogers. Is what we're doing.
It never happened.
But I think, Steve, I love that this is like the 4th episode that I've said this, so people are gonna think I have like a cue card. That I do love that you just said that you didn't, get a degree in this. It's just kind of like an art that you have, and we've always said how it's so amazing in environmental activism, because there are so many people that they're not an attorney, they're not a scientist, they don't have this degree, they don't have that. They're just people living in the world, and maybe they're advocating through life experience. Maybe they're just someone that sits and reads books on books on books on books, and they know more than anybody with like 4 degrees. And it's so amazing to see, like, and I think it just proves to so many people, like, yeah, you don't need a degree. It's great if you want to get one, but you don't need it to do what you love and be amazing at it like you are. And it, like, watching your films, just seeing how you craft it, which also we should note that your Green Amendment New Mexico Part 1 just got the 2022 Cinema Verde Award for Social Justice.
That's right. That's right.
So,
I forgot to applaud you for that. That was woohoo.
But I just think it's like how you've been able to craft all of this. And it's just so much to the point of, these are like talents that you've cultivated, and it's so cool to see.
I think it always starts off with loving something, right? So I'm a lover of film and a documentary, and I absorb it. When I see a good film, a good documentary, it kind of enters my consciousness, and the things that I really like about them kind of stay there. And so, maybe some of it is mimicry, and then some of it is inspiration that you come up with when you're making the films. But and when I first started doing this, I was working with a gentleman who went to NYU Film School, and we would sit together, and he would edit, and I would sit behind him and watch, and I would say, "Oh, could you try this?" And he would turn and look at me and say, "How did you know that's a great idea?" And I would say, "Oh, I don't know. I just thought I liked the way that would happen, whatever it was." And he would always look at me and say, beginner's mind, beginner's mind. He said, "I went to film school. I wouldn't have tried that, whatever it was, transition or whatever the method was." But he said, I would always say to him, "Maybe I should go to film school." And he would say, "No, don't, because you have a beginner's mind, you have an artist's mind, and stick with that, because that is going to help you tell the stories better." So.
Have you ever had the experience? I can't imagine you have, but like in my own life, I'm quite shocked at what people come back with when you're working with them. Have you ever had the experience, right, where you're working on this amazing piece, this amazing message, and then whomever you're delivering the product for comes back and says, "You got to cut out that whole middle chunk," or you gotta cut this way back. Like, this should only be half as long. Or like, have you ever had that experience, and how frustrating is that? And for you when that happens, knowing how long and how much of your heart and your thought go into each piece you do?
It hasn't happened in a big comprehensive way yet. Hopefully it doesn't. And also, like, I'm usually kind of creating out of my own little workshop. So I've been lucky to not have anyone kind of, and most of the films I make are all out of my own wallet. It's like, so I don't have a sponsor who's looking over my shoulder telling me, "Oh, you can't show that, we don't want that in there." I have had things that needed to be cut, trimmed, and the hardest part is for me is when I've edited something and then have to make a change, because I've been sitting with it and working with it and shaping it and molding it for so long in that way, that for me then to make a change, it just automatically feels wrong. And it takes a little while for me to wrap my mind around it. And I'll say to myself, well, my version was better than what they want me to do. But in that case, it's probably a client, and it's their vision in that case. So, yeah.
Have you ever had with that then, because you are like, here's the story. I love the description too of, it's like New Jersey, America's most misunderstood state, or I love that. I think it's so fun. But have you ever had like where you are really dedicated to that storyline, or it's just like a really powerful, I don't know, moment, and you're just like, I really wanted that, and then maybe for timing or whatever, like, you have to disconnect from that, almost from what you wanted to tell?
All the time. That's all the time. Yeah. Things don't work out the way you want them to. Storylines kind of fade, or the subject changes their mind. I've been having that experience a lot lately. I'm not sure why. People I've been talking to in the production world, say, well, they think it's all part of this this idea of the Great Resignation, not the Great Depression or the Great Recession, but the Great Resignation. And I don't know if it's a symptom of that, but only in the last year, it's been very difficult to kind of motivate people into the process, wherein it used to be so much easier to get people to, say, oh, we're going to film the interview this day, and then we end up doing it. We have this kind of projection for when the film has to be done, and it gets done. It's I haven't quite wrapped my mind around it, but yeah, there are many times where I have an idea for something that I want to do, and I have to either modify it or scrap it completely. And sometimes,
Wow.
sometimes a better work comes out of it. I'm doing a piece right now for PBS about childhood, and originally it was going to be, I love man on the street. I love meeting people, strangers, and hearing what they have to say. So we crafted a series of questions that we were going to interview people all over the state, asking them their perspectives on their own childhoods. And you get into January, February, and being out on the street is very difficult. But the production wheels continue to spin. And then what we've modified it and evolved it into is selecting a group of people and going to places that were significant to their childhood and interviewing them in those spaces and places. And the man on the street thing is hugely significant to me and exhilarating to me to do. And I love doing it. And we did it a little bit for this, but I have to be honest that the modification, the evolution of the idea of being with people in their important places has almost a more rewarding feeling to it. So sometimes the evolutions, the modifications are actually all for the best. Probably always.
Is there, so you do, what are the breadth of stories? So I know you primarily for your environmental reporting, Green Amendment, but also just broader environmental. Those are most of my experiences with you. And when I watch your shows, of course, those are the ones I gravitate to because that's who I am. But what really is the breadth of your, I don't know what you call it, catalog of work?
Originally, it was, like I said, to get in the car and to go somewhere and get out and talk to people about where they live, who they are, what have you. But I also found that I'm really driven by people, just people in general. So let's use yourself as an example. I was investigating the Penn East pipeline story. These folks, local folks who were pushing back against this development. And I started attending various meetings and filming them and talking to people in the area. And somebody in Lambertville, New Jersey said, "Do you know Maya Van Rossum?" And I said, "I don't." And they said, "You should, because she's this powerful speaker, this very smart person who will break it down." That's the person said. She said, "She'll break down the issues for you so that you'll understand them in total." And they're not always easy issues. So I think I reached out to you, and it was going to be under the umbrella of doing a whole piece about Penn East. And I interviewed a lot of different people for it. And not that they weren't good, but to me, something about your personality, your vision, your mythology, because I think of you as a folk hero, stood out to me.
I love that.
I do. But whenever I describe you, I always say she's this folk hero. And someday I think that people will really know that and appreciate that about you. But I like the people. I like the person that stands out, the person who maybe, like Annika said, like myself, who didn't know how to make movies, but because I love them and I wanted to do it, I just started doing it. So it's often people who are doing something special that you can just see that it radiates from them. And that kind of simple joy, appreciation, dedication to me is sort of like, oh yeah, that's a person that I want to include in the film.
And if you
So-
had, go ahead. No,
No, you go.
I'm just because I think one of the things that I'm most jealous about of what you get to do, Steve, is that you get to talk to so many different people. And like, I know I've had throughout my life a few people that I don't know, they're not my friends. I've just, met them in my travels and just really have left like an imprint on my soul. Like maybe it's something they said, maybe it's just who they were. And so for you, like, how has that been, just meeting all these different people, and like have people left those imprints on your soul, or have you had those experiences? Like I'm super jealous of that, of just all these great people you get to meet.
Yeah, for sure. They almost always, I'd say 95% of the time, if you can quantify it, they almost always become friends, and I stay connected to them. And sometimes I revisit them, like we did with Maya, because the first piece that we did was about Maya and her messaging, and the importance of her messaging. And then we kind of we revisited it with the Green Amendment. But I do that. A lot of these folks do become friends of mine. People have said to me when I've been interviewed on the radio or for the newspaper, what have you. They've said, "What's your favorite episode?" Which is always difficult. It's a standard question to get asked, and I always say the newest one, the latest one, because when I do these films, I do it. It's like handmade. It's not like a big production where I have production assistants and people calling up the subject and doing a pre-interview. And I do it all. I set up the lights, the cameras, the microphones. Um, it's really, I always say these films are handmade. And so they become really important to me, and the stories become really important to me. And as I said to you, Maya, that I listen to and watch the interviews 6, 7, 8 times, 9 times, 10 times. And so you become very intimate with the person and their message. And so yeah, they stay with me for sure. And also often what happens is when I'm making them, it's something that's almost applied to what's going on in my life. So when I think back in a certain time period or watch the films, they trigger thoughts of that time period. And again, often I have a nice opportunity with PBS that they don't say, "Steve, we want you to go tell that story." I tell them what story I'm working on, and I go after it. So most of the time, it's stuff that even from the first time we start recording, start filming, it's something that I have an interest in.
See, now when you say talk about listening to those interviews over and over, I think we've all probably had or will have times in our life, maybe not, maybe this is a window into me, where we've done exercise videos or something, right? And you do the same one over and over because you only have whatever, like 5 or whatever, and then you hear that same stupid joke every damn time, right? You're like, oh. And so I just think about you cooking up in the kitchen and listening to people over and over and be like, oh my God, what a stupid thing to have said. And just like
Well, I do quote my own show often, and I think it's probably because I'm being, it's like hypnotic. I hear, and I'll say something to somebody and they'll think it's kind of a random thought, and I'll have to tell them that I'm quoting Maya Van Rossum or Tony Ingraffia, somebody that was on my show. And yeah, like I said, unlike other bigger productions where they have lots of moving parts and people play different roles, I do it all. So everything is very dear and intimate for me.
Which I have to say, the Tony Ingraffia one, that is always, I play just that clip for so many people. I skip over my own clip because I'm too embarrassed to show myself, but I play that for people all the time. And the way you shot that, Steve, is just like, I mean, Tony's words are beautiful, Tony's reaction, but I think too, the way you shot it and the way you did it just brought so much of like you can feel how Tony is just like struck and upset. And I really encourage anybody who's like, I don't know what they're talking about, that's a teaser for you to go watch the Green Amendment part 2.
Here's the story. No, I think it's part 1, right? Here's the story, the Green Amendment.
No, I think it's part 2.
It's the very first one. Part 2 is New Jersey.
They kind of melt into
I
each
know.
other. from
Go
being-
watch them both. Go watch
Go watch them
Uh,
both. But
yeah,
it is
Tony.
heart-wrenching. It's
Yeah,
heart-wrenching.
it really is. It really is. You know, one of the things that I'm known for with my filmmaking is I like to be really close. I like extreme close-ups because I feel like what the people are saying is true. And you can tell a lot. You can see the truth in people when you're face to face, because when you talk to somebody in a conversational style, you're not looking all around them. Hopefully you're not. You're looking them in the eye. You're looking right into their face. So when I film, I always have a wide shot so you can see what's around them, the atmosphere. But I like the extreme close shot where it's just, you know, from the eyes down to the chin. And people often say to me, why do you do that? And that's the reason, because you want to see somebody who's wise and emotional like Tony was, and I think that sells his message. His story is emotional, and you can see that what he's saying is meaningful to him. So you're spot on to say that that is an element of the work. I always try to make sure that the emotional shot is always in the interviews, for sure.
Now, there's one, I'm not sure how much detail we're allowed to divulge on this, but this is not about the idea to come, which I'm going to ask you to tell people about, because we want people to know about it, because we want people to help us make it happen, man.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, there was one episode of the Green Amendment where I was supposed to do an interview with an elected official.
Yeah.
And for any number of reasons, the elected had a preference that I not conduct the interview.
Sure.
Right. And so we don't need to go into all the ins and outs of it. But you suddenly found yourself on the other side of in front of the camera, doing the interview with Governor Phil Murphy. And just wondering for you in that moment, suddenly coming from behind the camera to the front of the camera to do this really important interview with this really important person. And you extracted really powerful words from him. And it's just wondering what your thoughts were about the dynamics of that moment and how you suddenly hopped from, one seat to the other seat, to the hot seat and made it happen.
In that case, I was going to be behind the camera, and I was really looking forward to it because I love watching you interview people. And yeah, I mean, the whole experience was a real whirlwind. But again, it's one of those things where you adapt, you overcome, the mission evolves, and you do what you have to do. And the opportunity or the choice was, we wait and do this another time, which maybe never would have happened. We had the opportunity to engage Governor Murphy, and I just got in front of the camera, which again I never do. Even on the show, when I interview people, you don't see me. But it wasn't even so much the visual. It was, talking to somebody of his stature and wanting to make sure that I asked the appropriate questions to get what we needed. And I remember part of that story is that, you get limited time with somebody like Governor Murphy. And I said to you when I was now thrust into the interview seat, I said, Maya, let me see your questions. And we were looking at the questions, and I said, what do you think are the three most important questions? And you were like, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And you were listing more than three. And I was like, oh my. So I just internalized. And then when he walked in the room, the questions I asked him were the ones.
Perfect.
Yeah. Because once you know the subject matter, and spending time with you and Tony, and remind me of Franklin Curry and all of these folks who are parts of the Green Amendment story, past, present, hopefully future. I know the story, so there's no reason to be nervous about talking to somebody about it. You can forget the questions and just have a conversation with somebody, and that's what happened, and Governor Murphy was very gracious, and he asked us where we were from, and I live in Red Bank, New Jersey, and he said, "Oh, well, I'm in Red Bank too." So we sort of had this kind of homeboy connection immediately. But yeah, that was an interesting experience for sure.
Have you had any other like I feel like your stories generally like the people know what they're getting into, but maybe in past film experiences where maybe the person wasn't doing telling the story you wanted, or maybe were in more of that like adversarial, I wouldn't say that interview was adversarial, but more like, like, hey man, and they're like, ah.
Well, as we all know, the climate of conversation in the last 5 years is different than anything, certainly in my lifetime, in Maya's lifetime, and probably yours as well, Annika.
Oh yeah.
And so we have had situations where we have gone to an event and not even anticipated having it be confrontational. And when I say that, I'm talking about supporters of a certain right-wing political movement. And I have always tried to talk to them in a completely fair and balanced way and say, oh, listen, tell me your perspective. And there's always been a predetermined idea that I'm the enemy, even though I'm holding the camera and pointing it at them and saying, "You speak." I won't say a word. So that has been probably the most confrontational experiences, or like surprising experiences that are sometimes, frankly, scary. But which is sad that you can't have that kind of discourse. Somebody from the press asking you an open and honest question and giving you a platform to speak, and they would call me a communist, and I would get all of these kind of things, and it's just ridiculous. But yeah, I think that's it. For the most part, the people from New Jersey have always been quite kind, and I think one of the things about New Jersey that I always say is people, and not just New Jersey, I should say, we cover New Jersey, Pennsylvania a bit, New York. We're talkers here in the Northeast. People love to talk. And so for the most part, I ask them if they'll speak on camera, and they agree, and then they go. So, yeah.
It was interesting when Annika and I were battling against the use of a racist mascot name and imagery for the local sports team, the Radnor Raiders, along with Native American imagery and Indian bobblehead and the like. There was going to be there was a New York Times reporter. It's New York Times, right, Annika? Mm-hmm. That was coming and just did an open-ended like thing on social media, on the social media thread of those who wanted to maintain the name. And said, like, I'm going to be at this place at this time. Anybody wants to show up and talk to me, tell your story. And it was the same kind of thing. Got there was immediately a statement put out saying, nobody show up. She's coming to misrepresent us, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, I'm just coming to hear what you have to say. I'm trying to give you a platform, just like you said.
Yeah.
It's just kind of striking.
Yeah, it's sad that this is what our contemporary culture believes when it comes to the press. And I'm not going to say that there isn't press organizations, media organizations that slant to a certain degree, but that's not everybody. And when a reporter offers to let you speak and give your perspective, give it. Don't be afraid, and don't stonewall to not, because that is your opportunity. And I don't know. That really is the only. I don't really do much confrontational stuff. In fact, when I get a confrontational issue, there's always like, oh boy, here we go. I like to get into the lives of people who have a light that's shining out of them, and try to capture that light. So they're typically non-confrontational.
Well, I think the title of your series is just like, it says it all. Like, here's the story.
Yeah,
it just is what it is.
Yeah. Sure. And that's how we open every episode. You hear my voice say, here's the story. And And that's sort of like something my father would say when he would tell us something. He would come home from work, whatever, and he'd say, "Oh, wait till you hear what happened to me today. You ready for this? Yeah. Okay, here's the story." And then he would go into what it was. And so that was a saying that I heard quite frequently growing up.
Oh, that's really cool. It's
Yeah.
an interesting side note. While you got Governor Murphy to speak very positively towards the idea of people having a constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment, for those who are wondering, right, we do have our Green Amendment movement advancing in the state of New Jersey. And unfortunately, the governor has not taken a formal position one way or the other
Right.
on the Green Amendment, but has certainly not taken a position in support of it. And given, I thought was a really good interview where he really talked about, in response to your question, Steve, about the
I think I
value
was
of.
very clear about what it was and asked him, would you support that? And I believe he said, yes, he would.
Yes, but he unfortunately has not yet.
Right.
Maybe we need to get you in a room with him again, Steve. Maybe that'll take care of it.
I don't know if they'll give me that opportunity again. I'll have to catch him somewhere downtown in Red Bank.
That's
Maybe
so cool.
a man on the street situation.
Do you want to share, Steve? So we do, we've been cooking up this idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Can we tell people what our idea is? Maybe there's some supporters out there who can help connect us.
I don't think it should be any secret. Like I said, I've always thought of you from the first time I met you as like a mythical but real figure. And like I said, a folk hero. And
You're very nice, but that's not the.
Listen, all someone needs to do is A, read your book, or B, watch any of the films, and I believe, if they're honest about their feelings, they'll agree with me for sure.
I just have to say, I love hearing Steve say this, because like I do when I talk to my friends about my mom, and I'm very like fangirly, like you would think that my mom is like my celebrity crush, which she might be, and not a weird. and like, yeah, I get it, your mom's great. And then every group of my friends who like she's come and spoken at my college or go out to dinner, and then afterwards they're just like, oh, I get it. It's literally all I get is like, I get it. Like, I get why you think she's so great.
Okay, you guys are really nice, but we're talking about
saying.
Steve today. We're talking about
no,
Steve and
fine.
our idea.
You're right, because and I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to move on to the idea. Is a lot of the issues are legal. A lot of the issues are environmental. We're talking, statutes and constitutional amendment language. We're talking chemicals I'd never heard of, and the effects therein of these chemicals. So it's not necessarily easy subject matter, but you explain it in a way that is cuts through it all, and the light bulb goes off. I've seen it I know I felt it for myself, but I have seen it. I don't think I've ever not seen it when you talk to somebody, even when we were stopped by the police in Paulsboro, New Jersey, because the fossil fuel industry there didn't like us driving around and filming from a car. And we were stopped by a police officer. It's in one of the films. You spoke to him and totally disarmed this man, and he was nodding and agreeing with you about everything that you were saying, and was like asking us for more information about how he could see what we were doing, etc. So that's a significant development. So anyway, the idea that has kind of germinated from this is not just from New Jersey and Pennsylvania, where we have traveled all around the state, but your trip to New Mexico was sort of a real grand inspiration, was to see you in these beautiful but endangered locations in our country, and to see you both enjoying them and witnessing the damage and the degradation of these environments, and talking to people, both legislators and what we call everyday people, about these issues. To me, it's a natural for a series that you would see on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu, because it is the kind of story that I think people could really get into. It's the story of one person's mission to change the conversation and to hopefully change the world, and certainly change the United States, for the people, for the people who are living and breathing and drinking and experiencing these environments. And it's not just an environmental series. It's entertaining in a way because it's the full spectrum of experience. You spoke to a state senator out in New Mexico, and he talked about climbing into a wind turbine. And you were in many beautiful areas of New Mexico. And so to me, as a filmmaker, I naturally say, I want to go to all of these states with you, Maya, and see your interaction not only with the folks who can tell you what's going on the ground there, in the air there, in the water there, but also to see you in these environments, both because they are quite beautiful still, and also because they are being challenged every day. So to me, it's the kind of series that folks could benefit from, learn something about the United States, the places they live or don't live in, and also learn something about how we can make a change. And I think the light bulb goes off over every person's head who clicks and watches a Green Amendment series. So when we talk about it, the one thing that I would love to see happen is that when we go to these places, it's mainly you sitting down and having an interview. But I know that you are a lover of the natural world. We've been out standing in the middle of the Delaware, like pointing out flora, fauna, and the aquatic life there. And to me, that's another part of it that I would love to get. And that's where better funding and things like that come in, because to be with you in a kayak or in a helicopter or walking a trail, that is as important, I think, as the conversations you have, or together, conversating with people while you're doing these things. So that's sort of the kind of huge ballpark of an idea that I've been talking about, that we've been talking about. I don't know, did I describe it well or at all?
You did.
Okay.
So I wanna be a part of this show, man.
You want to watch that show?
I want to watch that show.
I want to watch that show.
So anybody out there, so Steve and I have been trying to put this together and pursue it with the Green Amendment team. So anybody out there that has a good idea or has a good connection to help us make that happen, we'd appreciate it, because we're ready to roll. Because there are a lot of important stories. You can read just in the news about how people are drinking. I mean, some of the most contaminated water in the world can be found in communities in the United States of America, right?
And also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is important. This is an important part of your work. It's often the people who don't make it to television, whose voices are silenced because of their position in our culture. And so, with my own show, Phil Murphy maybe is the most famous person that's really ever been on my show, because my show has always been about connecting with everyday real people. And those are the people who are being adversely affected by pollutants in our world. So, yeah, I mean, that to me is something that's important to shine a light on top of everything else.
Yeah, and it is very striking in your show when you give people, and it's not just, you're not just putting a microphone in their face. The way you do it, when you give them a space and a platform and a nurturing, encouraging way to talk about their challenge, their vision, it is quite striking, Steve, how you get people, as you said, what's in their heart to shine through and shine out. Mm-hmm. In a way that's all about making a difference.
And so do you. You get that same reaction. You really do. You really do. And the other thing is, like, the great thing about your work is that going through these interviews, particularly New Mexico, because I'm so far removed from that part of the country, is the folks in them would mention and describe the places that are struggling. And I would go and research it. And I would be blown away by this part of our country that I don't know anything about, and how it's been degraded. But really, the first thing is the beauty and the history of parts of New Mexico and the United States that we don't really know that much about, and we should. This is our country, and we need to learn more about it and preserve it. And that's what your folk hero mission is all about.
And that's what our joint vision right now, our joint vision coming together, because I think you have an incredible talent, Steve, and I'm honored to be working with you. And I do hope that we can make your vision, this vision happen, because I do think it can make a difference in a really powerful way.
I hope somebody listening and watching this really does, take initiative to get involved. Contact Green Amendments for the Generations, because if you're serious about the environment and your patriotism for America, you have the wherewithal to help, you should do it.
All right, Steve, I don't think we can come up with a better finisher.
That was a perfect close.
That was perfect close. You're such a beautiful person. You're such a beautiful spirit. You have such an amazing talent and such a genuine openness that inspires and supports people. There are few people on this earth that I truly admire and believe are just at every part of their core and fiber of their being are genuinely good people that want to use their talent to make a difference. And you are one of those few. That is for sure.
The feeling is mutual, and that's why the work is so good.
Well, we are really glad that you joined us, Steve. Thank you so, so much. Do you have any parting words of inspiration or engagement for our audience?
Get involved and read the book and watch the films.
Watch the films for sure.
Folk hero.
Yeah. And congratulations again, Steve, on the newest award, because that was really exciting. But it's your talent. You're the one who put that together. So that was really great. We just learned about that, right? And that was just not a surprise, just such a wonderful delight to see you get credit for your amazing work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Keep going.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Wow. He is just such a powerhouse. I feel a little bit, you guys were both so kind to me, which I really appreciate.
You gotta let people compliment you more. I know you don't like compliments, but let it happen when it's happening, lady.
But really, I mean, as you said, Steve is such an amazing talent. And to be able to work with somebody like that and have him see our vision, Annika, our vision for change, and want to help us spread the message and save the world, that is just like so awesome.
Yeah, I feel like Steve is one of those people, I feel like so many of our guests are, but Steve is one of those people, like, I just can't put into words like who he is and what he does. I'm like, you just gotta meet him. Like, he's just so amazing. I do. And I think his life journey and the way he crafts these films, and it's like a work of art. And I don't think people think about that when it comes to film, but I mean, it's Steve's work from his heart. And it's just, yeah. And I feel very honored that he cares so much about the Green Amendment movement. It's just like so meaningful.
It really is. I mean, I really feel like he's definitely part of our Green Amendment family. He's part of our leadership team. And I really would like to make this vision come to life, because like just hearing him explain it, I was just thinking, wow, man, Annika, like we should like have Quincy clip out that show pitch, and like maybe I'll share it with some folks that we've come across recently that have some ins with the industry or something. I don't know, not that we know those people, but like,
but if our listeners do,
but if our listeners do, this is a great little clip, because you can really see Steve's vision and his talent and his dedication shine through. Like, he has a real vision for what this should be, what it could be, and how it could make a difference. There's nobody else that can do this show.
Yeah.
But Steve, and that just shines through amazingly because of this incredible talent he has.
Yeah, agreed. So. Yeah, I feel like that. Yeah, agreed. So if you, like Steve said, get involved. If you listen to this, if you think that's a great idea, let people know. Do a little Twitter hashtag, guys, like hashtag Green Amendment Netflix.
Oh, hey, maybe we should start that up.
We can talk about it.
Green Amendment Netflix. Like that.
Like
Get
that.
going.
We're
going to do
people.
that. Get going, people.
So as always, if you found this episode inspiring, which you should, there's no reason you shouldn't, but if you want to watch those films, we will put the links in the description. But if you go to Green Amendments for the Generations on YouTube, you can see here's the story, the first and the second part, and the New Mexico parts, all the New Mexico interviews. Also go check out Steve's whole series, Here's the Story, on PBS. It's amazing. It's wonderful. He tells so many great stories. And of course, if you want to get involved in the Green Amendment movement, go to www.forthegenerations.org, sign some petitions, make a donation, buy some cool t-shirts and posters and bags, whatever, every little bit helps, and be an activist in your own right. And that's an easy way to do it.
And the whole Green Amendment movement was originated with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and me working in my role as the Delaware Riverkeeper. So if you care about the Delaware River watershed, www.delawareriverkeeper.org. The book, Richard talks about the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and the Green Amendment movement, called The Green Amendment. I'm working on the second edition, but it won't be out for a year.
Ooh.
So, well, a little bit less than a year, but it really, I think it's really a great way for people to learn about important issues and things that they can do to make a difference. And so we'd be honored to have you as part of the Green Amendment movement. So buy the book, get involved, donate. And if you know anybody at Netflix, Amazon, or CBS or ABC or NBC or whatever a C, whatever a TV, get in touch, because Steve has a grand vision, and whether it's the Green Amendment story or other stories, Steve is a powerhouse and is definitely worthy of your time, and you will get educated and inspired. So with that, what do we say, Annika?
Until next time.
Until next time.